Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Conversations with a Recovering Loan Officer. Today I'm joined by Ken Perry, who you probably all know just from his excellent online presence and movie-like quality, continuing education, and now licensing, like pre-licensing and licensing content. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's nice being on somebody else's podcast. This is super cool.
Yeah. Well, you have a podcast of your own. Tell us a little bit about that. What's it about?
Yeah, we launched, it's called Lessons from Last Time. And it's basically watching the industry crumble and talking to people about, I don't think I'm going to make it, or I don't know how to make it through. I started going back and going, we've all been through this before. Like, I actually feel better this time than I did last time, because I know what it feels like to lose all of your business overnight or the majority of it and then build that back. So I wanted to get stories from mainly mortgage people, but some others, stories of like, what have you been through and how did you get through it? And, there's a reason people who are 80 are way smarter than us. It's that wisdom they get from so many mistakes and then getting back, failing and fixing and failing and fixing. And I wanted those stories to be out there so that we can all learn from each other instead of being alone out there.
Where can our listeners find that podcast?
Everywhere you get your podcasts, we do through Podbeam. So like it shoots out, or Podbean, but we shoot that out to everybody. And then app.knowledgecoop.com is our platform for delivering content. So you can go there and watch the video version of the podcast.
Nice. That's awesome. So give us a little bit of background for those of you who don't know you personally, or maybe just like have seen you around, but don't know exactly who you are. Who are you and where do you come from as far as like your relationship to the mortgage industry?
Oh yeah. That's my favorite story. I actually got in the business straight out of college with no training. I got into the mortgage business, started as a loan officer in 98. And then I was like, so how do I learn this business? And they're like, oh, just go talk to people and see what they know. And here's a computer and here's a phone and go get them. And I was like, I had never owned a house. I didn't know what to do. And I was like, so you have no way of training me? And they're like, no. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I just read guidelines. Like I picked up the Fannie guidelines, the Freddie guidelines. I could tell you anything about any guideline. And I basically became as smart as I possibly could, because if I had no experience to brag about, I at least had to brag that I knew more than everybody else. And so I used knowledge to basically become a beast of a loan officer, did a ton of loans, got super bored because I had set records. And I'm like, what now? And my boss pulled me aside and he's like, you're bored. And I'm like, I am. And he goes, how would you like to make less than half of the money that you make right now, but you'll be twice as happy? I'm like, that's an equation I can get behind. And so I took a job as the trainer and we opened up like 24 branches across the US. We'd fly people in, I would train them, then we'd fly them out. I would drop into branches and train. But I started flying around speaking at these branches and in our national meetings and just loved it, happier than I'd ever been. And then we moved up to the Northwest to take a AE job. So going into wholesale, because I wanted to get up to the Northwest. We were in California at the time. And the same guy said, okay, you're going up to the Northwest. You're going to get back into sales. You're going to be really good at it. And then you're going to get bored again. But just remember, your heart is in teaching. And I'm like, okay. And so in 2000, we moved up. I was an AE. And then 2003, I quit my job and said, I was watching everybody do loans, and a lot of them couldn't do loans because they had no training. And a lot of them were falling for, the schemes that got the industry in trouble. And I was like, you guys are going to go to jail. But people didn't know, they'd get in the business and the first person they talked to was like, oh, here's how we do it. When you want to sign somebody's, document, you need to hold it up against a window. And like, that was the market. And I'm like, I can't watch this anymore. And so in 2003, quit my job as an AE, started a training company to teach people how to do loans and how to do them right. And that's where I've been ever since. So it's kind of the genesis of me getting into the industry, is I just couldn't watch it anymore.
So then your original company, the training side, was actually more geared toward like being a loan officer, or was it okay.
How to read a credit report, how to read an appraisal report. I'm known as like a compliance guy. And that was actually, I had a coffee with somebody and she said, hey, we want you to speak at our conference. Do you speak? And I was like, of course I speak. And she's like, cool. What do you speak on? I'm like, well, what do you want? And she's like, we want something compliance related. And I had been on the college debate team, so I'm used to researching and then developing a platform or like a case and then delivering it and defending it. And so I can read any law. And so I'm like, well, the do not call laws just passed. You want me to speak on those? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, cool. What do you guys like? She goes, what do you charge? And I'm like, I could charge to like talk at conferences. And I go, what are you paying people now? And she's like, we pay $250 for a speech. Like that's what we pay speakers, $250. I'm like, and so I took the deal, and then I read the do not call laws and then delivered a stand-up comedy basically routine that helped them understand the laws while still making them laugh and enjoy the time. And I was like, dude, I could freaking do this. And then I got the speaker next door was sick and called in sick, and they needed 1 hour on identity theft. And I'm fascinated by hacking and identity theft. And so I had been researching the heck out of that and writing a class on identity theft. And it was like half written. And they're like, can you run next door and speak there? And I'm like, sure. And I delivered a killer stand-up comedy routine next door, just totally different based on, stealing data, which it's my superpower is delivering really difficult content in a really funny way where you learn and laugh. And so I rocked that. I'm like, I want to do this for the rest of my life. And that's really when I started reading laws. And every law I read, I'm like, nobody knows about this, but like I could tell them and I can help them understand it and make them like it again. And like that really is where the compliance magic started. Is I just got addicted to reading laws and telling people what's in them and making a difference.
Well, I'll be the first to admit that, every year as I was going through CE before the Knowledge Coop, there's BK and then there's AK right before Coop, and then, or is it I don't know. But I would just glaze over, hit next when the timer went through, not watch the content, not read it. But no, because I was in the mortgage industry for 15 years, the information I need to know to pass the whatever tests at the end. And it wasn't actually progressing my knowledge or my expertise as a loan officer. And then a couple of years ago, I started using your programs, and I'm like, oh, I'm not actually going to be exhausted getting through this. And I maybe am not going to just be surfing the internet or closing loans on one screen while I'm just making sure the timer doesn't run on the other one. I'll just focus on it and learn something. Mm-hmm. And that was really, really cool for me. And some of your skits are hilarious. So, yeah.
It's so much fun. I'm making movies is a blast.
Yeah, and I don't have any experience making movies, but I have shot a couple commercials and produced content for a couple different YouTube channels, and it is a blast, right? Especially if you love the content and you can just look at it with a fresh eye. You guys are just, how frequently are you producing the content? Is it every year you guys are building new stuff?
We build content every week. So the CE piece, that, by the way, was a bonus for me. I never knew that they would put a requirement in that people have to take continuing education. I was just doing education for education's sake. And then when the laws started passing, Oregon, Washington passed their laws that required people to take their continuing education. And then the NMLS gets created through Dodd-Frank. And I remember the day that I looked at the amount of loan officers in the business and went, oh, there's a ton of money out there now that I can go get that's required, stuff. So back then when we were creating the pre-licensing education, continuing education, it was more that's really the bulk of the content that we created was that, and built a really good CE business. And that takes, for us, we'll start filming next year's classes next month. So we create every state every year. We never ever renew a CE class, because why would I make somebody watch the same thing twice in a row, or something that was created 2 years ago? We're so much better this year than we were 2 years ago that I don't want them watching the old stuff. So so we create something like 45 hours of continuing education a year. We update the pre-licensing education when it's needed, but we're on camera almost every day. And whether it's what's happening in the market right now, or what loan officers need to know about the new LMPAs, or, whatever happens, we want to be the one that delivers the best content on that thing, even if it's not continuing education, if it's more, leadership and sales and stuff like that. So, but there's always a camera on. This set is set up that I'm on right now. I'm actually on one of our sets. We have another set that's constantly set up behind me in another building, and they're filming in there, or another room, they're filming in there. So we try to get on a lot, and we have 4 producers that produce, we have a producer for each thing that we do, and they're constantly working.
So your content that you produced in the past, does it just go to a graveyard, never to be dug up, or what happens to that?
Sometimes, yeah. Yeah, it does. Some of the stuff, like we did a training last year that went into our CE that was me and Andrew from our company. He actually works here. He has a degree in ethics. And so I got him to go on camera with me and talk about Socrates and talk about utilitarianism and talk about all these different ways we make decisions. And it has nothing to do with mortgage. Everybody freaking loved it. It was like one of the things we did, and yet it's the one that everybody was like, that was amazing. So we just released that back into the Coop. So inside of app.knowledgecoop.com, we release our old stuff where you can go in and check it out. And then there was one, I did an interview with a hacker where I flew down and met with my favorite hacker. He was 15 when he was arrested by the Secret Service and the FBI. And he had hacked like everybody by then. And I was fascinated by this guy. And he has ADHD. I have ADHD. He's untreated. I'm treated. So I know the feeling of being untreated. So I was like, had this just connection and reach out. And I'm like, dude, I want to fly down and interview you. And it's a longer story than we have time for, but I got down there. We interviewed him for an hour on how he did what he did and what we need to do to protect ourselves from getting hacked. And that video will never go away. That's in the Coop right now. And it's insane. It's the only video I've ever done where we did an interview, and at the end, it's like, he walked out the door. There were 3 of us in the room, in a hotel room. We rented like a suite there to get him to interview with us. And 3 of us sat there not talking because it was crazy. Yeah. So that stuff will keep on forever. Like we won't get rid of it. It's in the archive there at the Coop where people can watch it.
I'm assuming you guys have pretty stringent password requirements now.
Yeah, we always did. But I was worried that whole time. My wife didn't want me talking to him because he wanted to do a whole like speaking tour where I interview him, because he's not one who, he can't stand on a stage and rock a stage, right? He's very introverted. He's very like alone in his, typical hacker type stuff. And all of his conversations are online. And so he wanted me to go around and like interview him because it was easy for us to talk. And so I told my wife, I'm like, there's going to be a book out that on his life. His name's Cosmo the God. And his name's Eric Taylor, but his hacker name was Cosmo the God. And I was like, honey, Cosmo wants me to go out and like do this tour with him. And she's like, what are you doing? Like, no, like this guy could completely take our life out. And anybody who knows I like this guy, or like we're buddies, anybody who hates him, now I'm on their radar, and you can't stop yourself from a swatting attack. Like they could call the SWAT team and be like, I'm Ken Perry and I just killed my family. And all of a sudden, the SWAT team busts in, which is what a lot of these guys do. So there's too much damage that can be done. So yeah, we don't talk anymore. I miss him.
So that's what's called a swatting attack. You make a fake call. Oh my gosh.
You spoof the phone number of the person, and yeah.
That takes it up a level, because I mean, my go-to is I order pizza and I send it to your house.
Yeah.
And it's paid
That's
cash.
how it started.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's like the most base level spoof that people were doing. And then they started calling it bomb threats was the next step. And then after that, they realized they could start pretending to be somebody and get the whole SWAT team. So on Twitch streamers, when you're watching somebody play video games, there's a bunch of them. You can Google Twitch SWAT, SWAT, and you can see SWAT teams coming in during a Twitch stream and throwing a guy on the ground and cuffing him. And whoever did it is watching the stream because they get their high out of that, right? A lot of these kids a lot of it's, kids who have ADHD, they're plugged into a computer all the time and like they're chasing the rush.
Yeah.
And they like that. Like, look what I just did. And then they can brag about that to, their entire network. And now they're the king or the god in that case.
So, and then on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you love the movie Hackers?
Oh, I love it. Yeah. There's so many. The one I love, I think people should be more concerned about is the movie. Frank Abagnale is in Catch Me If You Can, or like it's the story of Frank Abagnale. And Catch Me If
Yeah.
You Can is where it shows him doing what's called social engineering, where you pretend like you belong somewhere and then you can get them to give you information. And that's the bigger concern. So watching that, I'm like, that's exactly what's happening right now.
Wow. What do you mean by right now? Like just in society or just?
Yeah. That's social engineering is like the easiest. Hacking people is easier than hacking computers. So hacking computers have firewalls and, they've been protecting more and more and more. And so, but you could get somebody to give you their password pretty easily. Just have them take a Facebook quiz. And now all of a sudden you've got their mother's maiden name and you've got their favorite ice cream. And then you can use that to hack in.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's insane. Yeah. These, all those questions are like the same, the prove your identity questions are all kind of the same subset of questions. And man, yeah, it's crazy. So you mentioned the Coop a couple times, saying you put videos in there. Well, describe to me exactly what is that? If you're,
Oh yeah.
yeah.
So in 2012 or 11 is the first time, 2010, I started doing video, just YouTube video. And then I tried to get a system where I could deliver that, as training. So I never went online. I never did online training prior to 2010 because I just felt like the live experience is so great. But then it had me traveling 10 days a month or more. And so I started looking at how do we do video and then delivering that online. And there were no learning management systems I could do that with. And so I was like, well, we should build one. And so I started looking at like using another software. And my business partner at the time was an investor in a startup. And he's like, well, what if you worked with their developers to build something? And so I got to build whatever I wanted with these guys. And those are still my developers to this day. We ended up purchasing that company that built our software. So these guys, we basically would just jump online. I'm like, I want to do this, I want to do that. We were able to create something with the initial purpose of like upload a document or video, assign that document or video, prove somebody's watched it. So really it started as a compliance play. And then what we saw is people start communicating with their teams that way. So they'd hit add video off their phone and be like, you guys, stay motivated today. That's awesome, whatever, delivering turn times. And so it started becoming people's intranet where they communicate with their teams and move people into groups where they can communicate. All their underwriters are in one place. And so it just took on a life of its own and became more of the full way your company communicates, trains, collaborates, stores all their documents. So that's what the Coop is. And then last year we launched a public Coop. So originally you had to have a company and the company had to sign up for the Coop and then all their members, other people are part of it. And that's still the bulk of our business. But last year, looking at the way the market is, like it sucks out there right now. And we're like, well, if, I kind of went back to my roots and went, well, I started at a time that the market was a little rough. And what I did is I just learned as much as I could. So I was smarter than everybody else, right? So how can we teach in a way that people will learn more and be able to conquer this market? So that's when we started creating a ton more content and we opened up app.knowledgecoop.com, which is called Coop Plus. And basically we just pump content in there. And so anybody in the industry can go in and ask any question you want. We have experts in there. And then you're getting the benefit of our training constantly. So our CE is delivered through there. So you can get continuing education in there and you can buy it, or there's a subscription. We have 360 a year, gets all your CE. Basically everything we create is yours. And so people can go in there and grab that. And that's been fun. Like it's been hard, but it's been really fun.
It's a lot of work, but I think it's got to be pretty rewarding, right? Because loan officers in times like this, they really need community.
Yeah.
And they're not finding it necessarily because after COVID, right, people started moving to remote work situations, and you've got like this now, I don't know if it's like a big move, but it seems like a new wave into the broker community. It's kind of growing on that side pretty large, and that the brokers generally not paying big retail space locations, and but there's got to be ways for them to get feedback and learn. And so it sounds like the Coop which if you just say that link again, I'll make sure it gets in the show notes so that people can have, go in there. Yeah, it sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, it's app.knowledgecoop.com. And you're right, it's rough out there. And like whatever we can do to help, that's what we built our company on, right? Is just help people get better. And people go to Facebook sometimes, like even I do, when I'm like, I want to go, I don't really go there to learn something, but I'll go if I'm like, I'll get a notification saying somebody in this group just said something, right? I follow the Dave Savage and his mortgage coach group, which is now the Trust Engine group. Like I'll see stuff in there and really grow from it, but I don't want to be in Facebook. Like Facebook has never been anything for me but a distraction.
Yeah.
And so at least during work hours. So if I go to Facebook to go to a group, I'm like, oh, what just happened? And all of a sudden I'm gone, right? Squirrel. And so the Coop, what we wanted to do is be like, how about just for mortgage? So if you open up the Knowledge Coop, you're not going to be squirreling on something, especially next year as the election happens. I want to stay so far away from social media. It's crazy. And so if I know that like to learn, we call it learn, grow, win. If I want to learn, grow, win today, I'm not going to go to Facebook because that's just going to make me waste time. I need a place to go where the right people are there. The content is curated in a way that like, it's all straight mortgage stuff and growth stuff. And so that's what we wanted to do, is just help the industry not get distracted by all the chaos out there.
Yeah. I mean, even inside of groups that are for quote unquote mortgage, professionals, and they're hosted by associations, or there's a lot of like distracted white noise complaining, woe was me. And obviously I'm not saying that's not warranted, that they're not feeling that way, but it just seems like you said, it's a big distraction from what you should be focused on, which is like getting through, maintaining, growing your business. And so, having that not curated, but having sort of like a group of people that has the same goal as you and they're working positively toward it is awesome. So I'm going to check that out, personally. But what are you seeing today from loan officers? Like, what are they talking to you about as far as the biggest challenges they're having?
It's really interesting, this industry. Like I look at everything as interesting. You don't want to look at it as good or bad right now. Everything's fascinating because you can always grow through stuff. But what I see is, you have fight, flight, and freeze, right? That's I always knew about fight or flight. Freeze always, I didn't even know freeze existed till last year. Somebody taught me that, but there's a freeze still where people are like, oh gosh, like what's going to happen? And they don't really take that first step to do something right. And I'm still seeing a lot of that. And the funny thing is I have friends that are killing it, that are doing a lot of loans, and they're not sitting there going, what's going to happen next? They didn't punt their relationships. They didn't fall for the refi boom and not do what they needed to do with their realtors. So for a lot of people, it's legit fear because you didn't do that. And so they're like, well, what's step one of that? And the problem is, I think you mentioned earlier, the problem is when we listen to the same people over and over and over, we get the same thing from the same people. Like they're not going to help you if they haven't helped you in the past. Like hearing one more speech by somebody is not going to get you off the couch. But people need to go seek information from, outside of this industry a little bit and just get that knowledge they need. But I'm just seeing them go, everything's bad. And here's the fun thing. This will be the third best year in the mortgage business for anybody that started after 08. I just did an interview with Ryan Helt, a buddy of mine, and he brought me that stat. And we looked at the MBA chart, and the MBA charts of what they expect for 2023 is this massive drop off from 22. And when you phrase it like that, it's this like, oh gosh, like we're going to do no loan. But if you put that chart up and look at every year since 09 until 2020, 2019, every year was less production than is expected this year with rates the way they are. So if you aren't paying attention to 21 and 22, or 20 and 21, if you can get those out of your head, cool, now we can do business. But everybody's so locked in on like, why isn't it easy? It wasn't supposed to be. It was so freaking easy that people stopped like exercising. Like I run, and if nobody does a marathon off the couch unless they're insane, right? David Goggins could do a marathon off the couch, but most people, you need to train for that. And we stopped training. And then now we can't figure out why we're sore when we go out there and try to run again. It's because we didn't do anything. And so it's the first to wake up and go out there and like build their business right gets to win. But man, it's so easy to focus on the negative. And like, I think we as humans want something to tell us that we're not the bad guy, or that we're not, the only ones. Like everybody's dealing with this, like a blanket, like, oh, we're all sucking right now. Like, no, like find the people that aren't and figure out what they're doing and get after it. I'm just not seeing that as much as I would hope that I would.
And isn't that a risk? Isn't that like a really dangerous place to be in if you're just trying to get people to wrap you in a blanket and accept this reality you build for yourself when even the data supports that this is actually still a great time to be a loan officer?
Yeah. Yeah. But it's natural. Like it's normal for somebody to feel that way. The hard work is getting out of that mentality. And that's where, have you listened to David Goggins' newest book?
I haven't listened to it. No. How do you know I listen to books?
Oh, it's just a guess. I mean,
I do. Yeah, I haven't listened to it, but I mean, he's an animal, so I'll definitely check it out.
I mean, we need to be listening to stuff like that, the encouraging stuff and turning off all the stuff that's garbage. Like I've stopped looking at the news, and I try to never look at the news, but if you swipe left to look at the weather, right below it on my iPhone is the news. And every now and again, I'm like, huh. And I'm like, I think one time I've clicked on something that's benefited me. Like every other time I'm like, oh, everything sucks. And it's not healthy.
I wasted half a day, I think it was Monday, because I read some ad or some article about the USD crashing, basically this massive change in like US is going to be turned into Venezuela, And so I went down a rabbit hole. I'm like literally talking to everybody on my team. Hey, have you heard anything about this? And checking in with like my friends who are in the, in the market pretty heavily. And it made me, and finally, one of my buddies who owns this really very cool, it's a company that they don't manage funds. He built a software subscription service where people can like follow how he trades. And they just pay to be a part of his subscription, and he trades his own money, and he doesn't take anybody else's money. But he's got millions in the marketplace and does really well. And people that follow him, they, do really well too. And he's like, no, it's hype,
Yeah.
He had some other things to say that it's not completely hype, but it's like, it's not worth the time that you're stressing right now about it.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
it's very dangerous out there.
There's a mass communication theory on kind of an influencer theory, right? So there's these things, there's opinion leaders. And I'll never forget, I had a mass communications class in college. It's funny that college actually, you do learn some things. And I had a mass comm class, and they showed us this thing about opinion leaders. Like when you want to go get your car worked on, this is before the internet. So the internet had just come out. This is 1997. And they're talking about opinion leaders. Like if you want to get your car fixed, you go talk to one of your car guys, right? Everybody knows a guy. Well, that person is an opinion leader who has the power to change the opinion of a ton of people, right? So you have media, and then you have opinion leaders, which are the people that we trust in our lives when something happens. So if I'm going to go buy, my brother-in-law knows a ton about cars. And so I still do this. I can go on the internet or ask AI, but like I go to Steve and I'm like, hey dude, what do you think about this car? And he has the power to influence, right? So if the media says something, we need people in our lives. Like for me, it's Matt Graham. I reach out to Matt Graham. I'm like, dude, is this real? Like what's going on? Dak, who runs all of my finance stuff, I go to Dak on stuff. I'm like, where's the market going and what's happening right now? And if I have those two guys, I don't need the media because they all are that's when I learned about compliance. Like when I started reading, one of the things I love the most about reading it is most of the media is wrong. I don't listen to the media. I don't read the articles. I read the laws. And so the media will pick up one little thing and be like, look what's going on. And it's like, that's actually not true. If you read the law, you know that that's not true. Or Or people will say, oh yeah, this is fine. We ran it by our attorney. And I'm like, okay, that doesn't mean anything. Your attorney isn't there to tell you it's right or wrong. They're there to tell you what your risk is of making a decision. Your company may have gone, okay, we're going to take the risk. Especially right now, companies are doing stupid things that they're all going to pay for later. LO comp, loan originator compensation is completely out of control. And most are, many people are doing it wrong. And they're like, well, our attorney said it's fine. And it's like, well, you didn't look at an opinion leader. You paid somebody to give you an opinion that you wanted, and to tell you what your risk profile was on that opinion. And that's why I read the laws. And so if I can help people because I run them, then I don't have to worry about people getting locked in on something the media said. And as long as we have opinion leaders we trust, then you don't have to worry about that in every decision that you make.
Is there a business, or do you guys offer a service where like a company could come to you and say like, we're paying you, we don't want any preconceived opinions of how our LO comp is, or how our IT security policies are, or about how our, tell us where we suck and what we need to change, what's risky. Like, I don't want to go to jail. I don't want a $5 million fine. Is that a service that you know about?
Yeah, we actually send everything over to, First Line Compliance is a good company. My buddy Josh Weinberg over there, they do reviews of people's stuff and like tell them where their biggest issues might be. So anything, we try to stay away from anything legal just because it could be damaging for me. I've got insurance on it, but still I don't want to ever give somebody an opinion that can come back. But yeah, that's where I'd go. And then normally for me, it happens like I'll be at a conference and somebody will pull me aside and go, hey, let me ask you a quick question about this. And that's how I find all the illegal stuff. They're like, this is what my company's doing. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like LO comp is a loan officer problem, right? If you're getting paid illegally, you pay 3 times all of the money that you've made, which most loan officers I know in 2023 don't have 3 times what they made last year or the year before that. So you don't want to pay that fine. And so accepting an illegal comp plan could put you at risk. So it normally happens there. And I'm like, dude, you need an attorney because that's insane. And that's the most advice I'll give is go get an attorney because this, from everything you're saying, looks really bad.
So we don't need to name names or companies, but what is a common illegal LO comp plan that you see, or like your opinion of one?
Yeah, the easiest one and I go to a ton of compliance conferences and hang out with a lot of compliance attorneys. And so we always talk about like what we're seeing out there that's jack. The biggest one we're seeing currently is lead source. So in mortgage, a loan officer can't get paid differently based on prohibited factors, right? And so sometimes an LO wants to take a lower comp plan and they really can't do that outside of, some very small, ways. And so what'll happen is they'll go, all right, well, we're going to pay differently in our company if we brought you the lead from a marketing campaign than if you brought the lead from, your own sphere, right? So LO's doing a loan for their mom and they're doing that loan for their mom. They check the box, this is my own deal, blah, blah, blah. And then the mom's like, hey, can I get a better deal? I mean, you're my son. And you go, oh, yeah, sorry about that. Then you go check another box that says company generated lead. And that drops your comp, which in turn drops the interest rate. You've just made a change to make less money. The company's now paying you less money. That could be a huge problem. And you lied about the lead gen so that you could change your comp. And so if an LO has the ability to change that box, like it's not hard for a regulator to come in and meet with my mom and be like, so how did you hear about Ken? Oh, well, I birthed him. And so why would you be a company generated lead then? Like, it's not hard. We can track that. So that's probably the biggest way they're doing it.
So it's not the dual comp plans for lead generated from a company versus self-generated.
Yeah, those are good. It's just the way we're using them.
Okay. So, man, that's hard. That'd be really hard to audit, right? There's a lot of trust sort of built into that where the loan officer's got a lot more control than, like, how do you regulate that, I guess?
You lock the box.
Yeah.
So don't let a loan officer change that box once it's checked is the first thing you can do. It's like, because if I checked it, I generated this and then I need a better deal, that's where it's happening. So if you know where it's happening, you lock it and you have to go to the compliance department to get it unlocked. And then they would review it, talk to the borrower and be like, tell me about your interactions with us. Okay, cool. Then I'm going to allow for it because it looks like it really was just a mischecked box. Like, how can you check it and then 20 days later, it became a different lead?
Yeah.
Like, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah. The one I see sometimes too on the broker side, and I'm just, your opinion or whatever, is I see brokers setting up different comp plans with wholesalers.
Yep. And they really shouldn't. You should have the same comp plan. Like, because a broker shop is a loan originator in the LO comp rule. So a lender paying loan originator differently, it could be a danger because now you're accepting pay. So remember, just like RESPA it's illegal to give and receive, LO comp, it's illegal to pay and receive. So both parties could be, on the hook in that case.
Yeah. And it's hard because it doesn't feel like there would be anything wrong with that. But I mean, that's the way the laws are written. I mean, what is a penalty for something like that if you get caught?
It's 3 times all your comp.
Okay.
So if you made $2,000 on a deal, you're paying back $6,000. And I'll tell you, by the way, so I always like to look at, why does that exist versus, because it doesn't seem like a pain. Like, why are we doing that? All we're doing is giving somebody a better deal and paying the loan off to less, letting them take the hit from that. And all of the fair lending cases right now, the majority of them are coming from this type of thing. So you're switching to make less money for that borrower. But what we see is most exceptions are given to white and Asian borrowers. And so if you're trying to get an exception and then we zoom out at the whole company, and if you have a whole company that can do that, every time they have zoomed out, they find that white people and Asian borrowers get better pricing than everybody else. So they lock it, not just so that we're not charging people more. That's one of the reasons. But also, like, how do we make sure everybody's getting a fair price? Like, if I walked into Target and bought, what would I buy at Target? A video game, right? I go in and I buy a video game or an Xbox. And they're like, cool, it's, an Xbox is $500, whatever they cost. $500. I'm like, all right. And I pay $500. And the next person comes in behind and goes, I'll give you $400. And they're like $400. Like, that's not fair pricing for anybody, right? And if they look at it and go, every white person who asked for an Xbox at $400 because they knew they could, that they didn't give it to them because they're white, but they're like, oh, this guy knows the deal. So if you know the deal, you get a better deal. But if you don't, because you're busy doing other things with your life, now you get a worse deal. It ends up like panning out so that people, it separates the haves from the have-nots because the haves know that they can charge more or they can get a better deal. Have-nots don't know that. They're busy trying to feed their family. And so it's really to stop that type of stuff.
But in what other areas of your life is that even, because it feels like to me that in every area of your life, that is a skill. If I'm a borrower or a consumer, I'm going to leverage the tools I have in order to get myself the best deal with everybody I know, right?
Yeah.
And so if I know because I've asked the question and I've put myself on the line to say, hey, how about this price? But this person doesn't ask that. Why is that my problem?
Yeah, it's not like you're getting a good deal because not for it. I love deals. I get sales everywhere. I use technology to get better deals constantly. The problem is you can think about that because you're not wondering where you're going to get your next meal. And so the person who doesn't know isn't because they're not a smart person. It's because they were busy trying to, they don't have the internet. It's a really good thing to look back at 2020 and what happened with work from home and school from home. Because what happened is a lot of kids who had to go to school from home got assigned a Chromebook, which means they were able to not really miss a beat in some cases. Like they were able to just kind of keep going in school just fine. But some people don't have a Chromebook and now they're working from home. They don't have a computer. And by the way, they have to watch their 3 brothers or sisters because mom and dad have to go work because they're struggling to get by. That student doesn't now have that same knowledge that somebody with a Chromebook has, right? So it separates the people who know they can get a better deal from those who can't. So to not regulate it is to say, yeah, let's just keep going with the people who know and then punish the people who don't, because those people who don't then pay the price for not knowing. And I'll give you a super basic example. I checked into a Frontier flight once ever. I fly Alaska Airlines almost exclusively, United on International, but I checked into a Frontier flight and I saw the person, I checked in and they're like, well, you have a carry-on bag. That's going to be like $25 or $30 or something like that. And I was like, well, it's a carry-on. And they're like, right, it's $30. I'm like, whatever. And I go, that seems kind of crazy. And they're like, oh, just log into your phone and do it online and it's 20. And I'm like, oh, dope. So I jump on my phone, I pull it up, $20, paid for it there. Can I check in now? And it's good. So I saved like $10. An elderly couple walked up right after me and they're like, we need to, we have this carry-on. And they're like, great, it's $30. And they were like, really? Is it $30? I'm like, yeah, it's $30. And then they paid the $30. So the person at the counter said, this guy probably has a phone and knows tech. I'm going to help him out. These elderly people probably aren't going to be able to do it. And I don't want to take the time to explain how to go log into this thing. So they ended up paying a higher price because they didn't get the same information as I got. And so that's where it starts to get really ugly, is like, who are we telling that there's an opportunity there? How many times in your life have you used your privilege to get something? Like, I know what exists out there. I get upgrades on rooms. I get things that I ask for because I know I can go after this thing. Because my experience, I'm not suffering and wondering where I'm going to eat next.
So, I mean, that's part of like learned skill or whatever that you, created through, like you said, just having the ability to learn the information from your life.
Yeah.
Like, could the elderly couple have just said, like, is there a way to get a cheaper price?
Yeah. And it would have been the requirement of the person to actually tell them that and not judge them and go, no, like, yeah.
Yeah. So that'd be like
you're right.
It's a policy issue or something like that if they didn't have to provide that information.
Yeah. If you think about it, that person at the counter doesn't hate elderly people. Like, I think there's this concept in fair lending that we look at, you're doing it because you must really want to discriminate against those people. It's not that at all. It's that the person was taking the easiest shortcut. And when pricing was, you could price whatever you want. I mean, the scale at which people with the same credit, the same income, the same everything were getting charged more if they were not white was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Because you're like, well, I can kind of get away with this. And it wasn't because of your race. It was because they didn't think you would ask about those things.
The challenge with that too is that only leads to more issues and more poverty in that case, right? Because you've got this subset of customers who their credit is bad because they're struggling to pay their bills. So their credit is bad. And then all of a sudden you've got a higher rate and your house payment's more and it just snowballs. So recently, and I actually love to get your opinion on the new loan level pricing adjustments for credit stuff.
Oh.
What's the deal?
It's so in solving problems, you can either solve for root issue problems or you can solve for symptoms, right? And America is very good at attacking symptoms, but never solving the real problem, right? And so that's what we're seeing with the LLPAs is that instead of like going in and saying, how can we like help people get more educated so their credit score goes up or so that they have more down payment or counseling works. By the way, homeownership counseling works really well. There's numbers to prove it. If you put somebody in a homeownership counseling program, they will be a better homeowner than if you don't, right? They'll make their payments more, they'll make better decisions. But instead of going in and saying, let's educate people, they take the easy road, right? And so the easy road is let's just give people better rates and fees if they have lower credit scores and higher loan to values, lower down payments. And that's really going to serve that community. But it didn't do anything, right? In debate, we used to call this a symbolic action. Symbolic action is when you do something so that you can brag about it and pretend like you fix it. And the error in a symbolic action is you're not going to go try to find a fix anymore. So another great example on that is did you see last year, I think Chase and a few other banks came out with these special programs. And the headline was, Chase is serving in the Hispanic and African-American communities by offering better rates and lower down payment, right? So yeah, there was a program in that community that would do that, but you didn't have to be that race to qualify for the program.
Oh.
So the problem with that is we are solving for a symptom to make it look like we really care about people, that are minority populations. but all you did is made it so that my kids will go take advantage of that program. You don't want to serve my kids, but you're gonna because you didn't put any requirements on it. My kids are going to go get better rates and a lower down payment in that community, and we're going to gentrify the hell out of that community. And now we basically just screwed every homeowner or every renter in that area. Right now, they can't even rent where they are. The better thing to do would be go, all right, well, we have all these renters. We want lower down payment and subsidies, whatever we can do. But the one tweak to make is you have to have lived in that neighborhood for 3 years. If they just added that one change, you're now actually serving that community. But you don't have to have that change to put a headline up saying, look how not racist we are. And so they come up with these ways to try and make it look like they're doing something. So yeah, this will have a minor impact on people with lower credit scores will benefit. They'll get a little bit, it's still more expensive if you have a lower credit score, but it's not as expensive as it was, which is kind of cool for them. The down payment one, I do not understand to save. I mean, we just came out of a time that our increase in home ownership was our main focus, and we just had subprime and all that stuff. And now we're like, hey, lenders, now you need to give better pricing to people who have lower down payments. Those are higher risk loans, but now just take that risk on, or you can't do a Fannie Freddie loan. And it's like, so you could technically get a loan right now with 5% down, go recast your loan right after it and pay the rest of it and get a better rate, which is just bonkers. So there's too many ways to game the system. It's a not well thought out government program that is, just like many of them, is solving the symptom instead of actually going after the root cause, because the root cause is hard. We have to sit down and go, why? Like, why is this the case? And then try to attack that.
So when you just mentioned that somebody could take out a loan and then, are you saying like refinance it immediately afterward?
If you were to go and there's ways to do this we probably shouldn't talk about, but if you were to go and get a loan with 5% down, some lenders will do a recast for you. So if you take 30% down, you put 5 in and you keep 25 out, and then you wait until after we close, and then you dump your 25 in and then ask your lender to recast your loan. Yeah. There's a way to do that where you would keep the same rate, not have had the upgrade. Now, I don't think anybody should do that, but like that's a way to game the system.
Yeah.
But that's a dumb thing. Yeah, totally. Right.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, at least it's not a, early payoff or whatever. Man. Well, we're about at time. Is there any like last things that you'd like to chat about? How can people get in touch with you? Hit us with it.
MortgageCoop.com. You could actually go in there, type Ken Perry in the search bar and just ask questions, or you can just post on the main wall. Like, that's a community of lenders that can go in and learn from each other. So we're constantly pumping content in there, and mainly just to help this industry get through this really tough time. So we need to learn our way through this. There's not a day that goes by that I'm not audiobooking, podcast, like listening to a podcast, listening to an audiobook. I just listened to oh man, I wish I could remember the podcast off the top of my head, but they interviewed the Uber CEO about going into 2019, trying to recover from the last CEO. And then 2020, they lose 80% of their business. Like, go listen to stuff like that right now, because that's the stuff when I listen, I'm like, oh, he's talking about losing 80% of your business. And then how do you rebuild from there? So yeah, that, and then lessons from last time podcast, listen to that. Cause I'm getting so much out of it. I keep going back and listening to these episodes because these guests that I'm having on are insanely good. We'll release one with Kirk Faulkner that I think everybody should listen to, where he talks about going through cancer, going through losing his dad. Like, we're digging into some really good stuff, or some where there's a lot of rich, lessons in it. So go listen to that and just keep your head up.
Hey, Ken, thank you so much for your time today. And
thank you.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to checking out your podcast and diving some more into that content.
Right on. Thanks for having me.
All right. Take care.